Kansas City Sports Update Studios. Welcome to Kingdom Radio, where we talk about all things Kansas City Chiefs. Brought to you by Arrowhead Update. Join Chris and Richard on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, Player FM, CastBox, and all third-party applications. Check us out on Facebook platforms such as Kansas City Sports Update and Arrowhead Update. And if you cannot find us there, Google or search Kingdom Radio and Kansas City Chiefs, and you will find us. Welcome to the Kingdom.
How are we doing, Kansas City? Welcome to Kingdom Radio. I am your host, Richard Smith. Along with me, my senior NFL analyst and co-host, kris-chavez. Chris, how are we doing? We are in the midst of this quarantine because of the coronavirus. We really haven't been doing too many shows lately. Still kind of taking that much-needed off-season break, and I'm going to pick back up here shortly. But Chris, how's things been going?
Things have been going really good. With the time off, I've kind of been focusing on setting up my online classroom for my students, kind of finding my own center in my life, and just kind of enjoying life as it currently stands right now and making the most out of it.
Hey, and that's all you can really ask for from anybody going, through this experience right now, is just to make the best of it and, practice your social distancing and spend some time with your family. Maybe rekindle some relationships or some friendships that have kind of, fallen by the wayside because of life. So it's a somber time in the country, but it's also a time to get back to your roots. And really appreciate life for what it is. And so, look, in the midst of all that, we know that there's, no sports in the world right now, but there's still Chiefs news going on. And look, Chiefs Kingdom, we can take a breather. I know we're a little late on this, but we can take a breather because the Kansas City Chiefs, indeed brought back Bashaud Breeland on a $4.5 million deal for 1 year. And I would hope that everyone in Chiefs Kingdom understands the magnitude of bringing a player like Bashaud Breeland back and what that opens up for the draft and where that puts the Chiefs in their depth chart. And Chris, I'm going to let you take off a little bit on this Breeland signing and what that means to the Chiefs and the depth chart moving forward to the draft, because it's a huge deal. And I think a lot of us realize how big it is. So, Chris, go ahead and take off on that.
Yeah, so Breeland just didn't find the market that he was looking for in free agency this year, and it was really impacted by the depth at at cornerback going into the draft. Mm-hmm. There's going to be a lot of really top talent that's going to be available, and through to possibly even the third round, that any of those guys could potentially step in and be a starter. And so Breeland just didn't find a market, and he was able to be re-signed by the Chiefs, in which case he ended up coming back onto the team, and the Chiefs are now going to be bringing back 20 out of 22 Super Bowl starters onto their roster going into 2020. And that hasn't happened since 2001 with the New England Patriots.
Correct.
But the other thing to also throw in there is that you now have your two starting cornerbacks coming back onto the roster. And with what we are currently going through with this stay-at-home order, this pandemic, so many of these players are going to be going to new teams, and they have to learn a new system. They have to get the cohesion with their colleagues. With the Chiefs coming back with 20 of their players, they already know the system. They know each other. These guys are going to be set up to make another very strong run at repeating a Super Bowl championship.
Absolutely right. It's a very rare occasion to bring back this many players and keep a team intact like Kansas City has managed to do, and especially with players checking their what's what I'm looking for here, checking their egos at the door, and being team players, taking pay cuts, figuring out ways to maneuver and manipulate the cap the salary cap so the Chiefs can stay, in Super Bowl contention. And so it's just nice to see all these things play out because, I think a lot of us a few weeks ago were holding our breath a little bit as to how the Chiefs were going to maneuver this cap space. And so now, just this one signing with Breeland opens up the door so much for the Chiefs. And I think that it was essential for the market right now to not be in, Breeland's favor. And if he's going to, make the same amount of money somewhere else, come back to a system that's already proven, that just won a Super Bowl. It's a really good look for the Chiefs and, the players within the organization.
Yeah, and it's the re-signing him really helped our draft strategy because we no longer have to take a starter at cornerback. We can focus on the one position that we really do have a hole in on the starter or at the starter position, which is linebacker.
Correct.
If a starter quality first round talent falls to us at 32, who whether it be Queen or Murray from Oklahoma, I've seen Zach Bond. I'm not as high on him, but I would not be upset if we were to take him. Those three guys are probably going to end up being a very strong option for us with that very first pick. Whether we take it at 32 or whether we trade down, I've seen a scenario. I'm not a huge proponent of it, but I've seen a proposal where we could potentially move up to about 25, give or take, and take a Kenneth Murray or Queen if the linebackers are there's a run on linebackers right there. I would much rather us fill that linebacker position and with a starter this year as opposed to draft somebody and hope that they develop and become a starter 2-3 years from now. We need to get a starter right away, especially at the will position. And then maybe in the second or third round, take a look at cornerback.
I think
just because after this year, we're going to be pretty slim at corner, and we need to be looking to develop some guys this year.
Let's talk about the linebacking core a little bit here. I think we all know that Neiman is not, starting material for the Chiefs' depth chart. Now, granted, he does make plays, and he is, in my mind, a staple for the depth of the linebacking core. But I'm with you on Murray or Queen, given they fall that far in the draft. Linebacker obviously is the essential piece to the puzzle right here for the Chiefs. And if they can get their right guy, obviously we talk about this over and over and over again with brett-veach's system and his proven process in the draft. And if that holds true this season, I definitely look for the Chiefs to nab up that starting linebacker, if he is available, but then also have a contention plan, a plan B just in case that doesn't happen and, they have to look in a different direction. Which is something that the Chiefs are fully capable of doing as well. I think that that front office looks to exercise any single route that they possibly can on every scale and scenario, and weigh their options. So it's going to be interesting to see what the Chiefs do here in the first 3 rounds and how they navigate everything, and what players fall, within their grasps. And so it's just going to be a big chess game, And so I guess, Chris, where we're standing right now, the Chiefs are just about, a week away from the NFL draft?
Yeah.
So the Chiefs are a week outside the NFL draft. They brought back Bashaud Breeland, and now it's time to really focus on these key pieces and, the order of which they should be drafted. And so, Chris, let's really touch base on that right now, because you had posted in your article, about the Bashaud Breeland signing, And what would be the Chiefs' plans in the draft? And so obviously, the number one pick, if we can maneuver this, would be linebacker and round 2 cornerback, and we've displayed why those are such an integral piece to the Chiefs' depth chart. But let's go a little bit deeper here. Let's touch base on round 3 and round 4, and let's talk position, and then we can go back and talk target players.
Okay, so in rounds 3 and 4, you're probably going to be looking at getting players who will potentially be stepping in and being either starters or major contributors down the road. But they're probably going to end up sitting on the bench and coming off to spell starters for this year. It's very rare that you find first-year starters in the 3rd and 4th round. Depending on the position, and we might actually be able to find some guys there. Wide receiver and interior line, you're going to have some potential there. Cornerback, because the draft class is so deep, you might be able to find a starter there in the 3rd round. Wide receiver, you're going to have potential there as well.
Which is the deepest position in the draft, which is not a bad thing for the Kansas City Chiefs.
Yeah, no, it's going to work out fantastically for us because we should not draft a wide receiver in the 1st or the 2nd round.
Absolutely.
But because a lot of other teams will be, that's going to help the talent at other positions fall to us. And so, assuming that we've drafted a linebacker and a corner in the first 2 rounds, our needs are still going to be at interior line. And it's going to be perfect for us to draft a guy in the 3rd or even 4th round to potentially sit a year, much like Nick Allegretti did this year, just because so often the offensive line talent comes in out of college a step slow in the pro game. And so it's best for them to sit and practice and bulk up a little bit so that when they do step in, they're ready to go.
Right.
You'll often see this with a lot of linemen who are taken in the 1st round. The Denver Broncos drafted, I can't remember the dude's name, but he's been an absolute Cam Irving for them, where he's just letting guys get past him all the time, and we've eaten him alive every time we've played him.
You're not talking about McGovern, are you?
No, not him. I think it was the tackle that they took 3 years ago.
Anyway.
But a lot of these guys come in and they're just not ready for the pro game, but they're thrust into the starting lineup because as a 1st round pick, that's your expectation. And it ends up doing them a disservice. Whereas if you take them in the 3rd round, there's no pressure. They can sit back and they can learn the game. And that's what Andy-Reid has done his entire career. He's only drafted, I believe, 2 offensive linemen in his 25, 30 years of coaching. And so drafting them in the mid to late rounds, it allows you to find those sleeper picks and truly let them develop into the starting role that they should have. And so I think that we probably take interior line in the 3rd or 4th round. Depending on who's available, I would not be upset if we took a wide receiver in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round. In the 3rd round, I'm going to be really picky about who we select there. But in 4th or 5th round, I'll be a little bit more lenient of who we take, just because I'm assuming that 5th round draft pick that we take at wide receiver in any other draft, he'd be a 3rd or even a 2nd round draft pick. That's how deep and how talented this wide receiver class is this year. Yes,
and it's something that in my lifetime I haven't seen a wide receiver class this deep, and it couldn't happen at a better time for the Chiefs. Nab up another premier talent at bottom dollar, and let them be an asset to the Chiefs' offense. and grow underneath, a DeMarcus Robinson or a Sammy Watkins who are on, the last year of, each of their deals. So that scenario couldn't work out better. But let's be completely honest, Chris, when it comes to the 2020 Chiefs NFL draft, the order of this draft completely relies on what happens with Murray and Queen in the first round.
Oh, absolutely. If those guys fall to us, I would be extremely surprised if we did not take them. I think that they're probably going to be the top two most realistic draft picks for us at 32. If we ended up going cornerback, I wouldn't be extremely surprised, but I would definitely be expecting the second round pick to be a linebacker for sure. And it really, like you said, it really all depends and hinges on Murray and Queen, and do they fall to us, or do we have to go in another direction? I don't really see anybody else realistically being our choice there, unless it's a cornerback. But that's only going to be or I feel that it's only going to be if Queen and Murray aren't there at 32.
And hey, and you never know with, Brett-Veach, he may very well move up in the draft. We've seen him do that as well. There's all sorts of options for the Chiefs to pull out, the picks that they want. It's just all going to depend on that first round. That's going to set the tempo. It always does, but especially this year for the Chiefs. There's some important needs, and the order of this draft will determine the core of the Chiefs' defense for the 2020 season, and that's an extremely important scenario that the Chiefs really have to do their best to fill this void. So let's the Chiefs filled some depth at running back. I don't necessarily think that was a concern, but the Chiefs signed former Raiders running back. What's his name? DeAndre Washington.
Yep.
And look, I will have to say that coming out of the draft, when the Raiders got Washington, I looked at him as a possible threat if he would have been utilized right. He kind of seems to be like he is a utility player in an offense if he's in the right system. So, Chris, let's talk a little bit about Washington and what he brings to the table for the Chiefs in a running system, that already has Damian Williams and, Darwin Thompson, who really hasn't had his chance to shine.
I think that this signing really does for the Chiefs going into 2020 what the signing of Shady McCoy did going into 2019. It solidifies the running back room. You've now got 4 quality running backs. You bring in a guy like DeAndre Washington, who played with Patrick Mahomes at Texas Tech, who is a legitimate running threat who can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's an all-around back who never really got his true shot at the NFL level playing in Oakland.
Right.
Going into 2019 pre-draft, a lot of experts were expecting him to be the starter, but then the Raiders go and they draft Josh Jacobs, and he's got to play second fiddle to Jacobs until at the end of the season when he gets hurt. Then Washington gets to kind of show what he can do. And he was impressive. He was running at, I believe, a 3.6, 3.9 yards per carry at the end. He had 16 catches for 135 yards. He had several touchdowns. The guy is very quick, and he's agile. He can make some cuts, make some people miss. I really like what he's going to bring to the Chiefs roster at running back. I think that it creates a little bit of a backup at running back for Darwin and Darrell Williams. I think each of them should have a chance to potentially show what they can do, but this is going to slow down their progression a little bit. We should probably see them at least compete for a starting position in 2021. I don't think that they're going to make that run this year.
So it's nice to see the Chiefs take care of the depth issues at running back, because let's be honest, the last couple seasons the Chiefs have, cycled through running backs and, bringing Spencer Ware back and, him hurting his collarbone, and it just didn't seem like the Chiefs could find the right piece, and not that Damian Williams isn't that piece. The Chiefs need someone to complement him on a game that is virtually built around the pass. This is not a system that favors any running back, and so it's just what can you bring to the table and how versatile can you be in an Andy-Reid offense? And I feel like Washington could bring that dynamic to the team and really turn some heads in the 2020 season.
Yeah, and just kind of going back to Darrell Williams, before his injury, he was averaging 5.5 yards per carry on limited touches. And, he was looking like he could potentially end up stepping in and taking that starting role away from Damian Williams before the injury. It'll be interesting to see how he comes back, how he looks, but I definitely expect for him to be gaining some touches towards the end of the season if he is finding his old form back. One other thing that Washington brings or influences the Chiefs in is all these mock drafts that are saying that the Chiefs are going to take a running back in the first round just negated that.
Yes.
Because we now have 4 quality running backs, and taking a running back in the first round, although it would be an upgrade at the position, and would be a waste of salary cap space, which we are already very much up against the wall with right now.
Right. And if you look at our depth chart at this time, it's not as bad as it sounds. Every position besides center, there's plenty of depth, and it just I think that our depth chart problems aren't as bad as they really look, and the draft is really going to take care of a lot of things here. And I like what I'm seeing. I like that the Chiefs went out and got Ricky Seals-Jones. That depth at tight end. That was a cheap scenario. Even the depth at cornerback. Oh, who did the Chiefs go get from? It was Antonio Hamilton from the Giants. So it was quick fixes to a situation that really wasn't even that high of a concern. It is, but look at the defenses. The Chiefs have produced the last season, or the season before last, and then previous seasons. These are Band-Aid fixes compared to what the Chiefs have had to overhaul the last few seasons.
Yeah, you're looking at triple bypass in past years, whereas this year is just a little triage. And it's like we can throw a Band-Aid on this and we're going to be just fine. And the other issue, and I know that a lot of people were kind of expecting us to make a big splash in free agency. We didn't have the cap space to go and make a big splash and have a big signing. But if you look at the moves that Brett-Veach made, they were all small. He signed a lot of interior guys who were already in the franchise, re-signed a lot of guys. He went out and found depth chart guys from other franchises, the Giants, the Raiders, the Browns with Seals-Jones. He brought these guys in cheaper than most other teams probably would have. These guys, A, want to play for the Chiefs and compete for a Super Bowl, but B, they want to have an opportunity.
Right.
And having seen how Andy-Reid puts together or utilizes his roster, how Brett-Veach puts together a roster, they know they're going to have an opportunity.
Absolutely, and that's a scenario too that all the teams that you mentioned, Cleveland, the Giants, and the Raiders, those organizations are somewhat in shambles. So I'm sure it's easy to work an under the radar deal with a general manager who really doesn't have a grasp on how to run an organization in the first place. So some of these moves are hustle moves as well in the depth chart, and that's something that I really like to see out of Brett-Veach as well, is him exercising every single avenue that there possibly is and utilizing the best route that is available, and that's the key to success for the Chiefs. And it's just fun to watch Brett-Veach at his craft and making his chess moves. And at the end of the day, when we put the final product on the field, it's been proven that this guy knows what he's doing. So, look, Kansas City, we're going to go into halftime here real quick, and when we come back, we're going to talk about some top prospects and hone in on the first few rounds of the draft and who we think the Chiefs are going after, and so we'll throw some names out there. So Kansas City, we will be back with you here momentarily.
Kansas City, it is halftime. Thank you for tuning in to Kingdom Radio. We will return momentarily.
Welcome back to Kingdom Radio. Before the break, we had talked about, the order that we think the Kansas City Chiefs should draft in, and it really depended on what happens with linebackers Murray and Queen in the first round. So Chris had completed a mock draft, and he put it in the article that we had mentioned earlier, which you can find on kckingdomradio.com. Go over to Chiefs News, click on that, and there's plenty of articles to choose from, all the latest Chiefs news. But Chris had mentioned his order, through rounds 1 through 5, and I think now it's time to really hone in on some names, because I think that's what interests Chiefs Kingdom the most, is who are our prospects? Who has Brett-Veach been honing in on, and what can they bring to the table? Are they starter quality? Is this a player that's going to need development? Where do they stand on the roster? So, Chris, go ahead and start with round 1. I'm sure you're going to kick off with Murray and Queen, but go ahead. Tell us what you got in round 1, and we'll kind of discuss that.
Well, you nailed it. Definitely, Queen and Murray are certainly on the radar in the first round, or at least with the first pick. If they're not there, I would really like to see us take Gladney from TCU. He's a cornerback, an extremely physical corner, loves to come down and support in the run game, which, as we saw last year, was extremely pivotal for the Chiefs' defense. Our cornerbacks were extremely influential in the run game and run support, which is very much part of Spagnuolo's defensive scheme. So I think that Gladney would be able to step in right away and contribute. I'd also be looking at an athlete at corner and A.J. Terrell, another guy who's and these names, depending on who you look at as far as their rankings, have been rated anywhere between the first and the third round. Taking these guys isn't necessarily pivotal in the first round.
Right.
There's a possibility that they could fall to us in the second or even the third.
So let's talk about. I want to touch base on something really quick while we're talking about, who the Chiefs will possibly be looking to select in the draft. And Chris, I want to bring something to light and back to the table that you had brought up in a previous episode, and you had talked about the checklist that Brett-Veach will go through for each individual position, each individual player, and it's Brett-Veach isn't a highlight type of guy. He's not going to sit and watch your highlights for your whole career. He is going to see what fundamentals you bring to the table, how versatile you are, because to be a Kansas City Chiefs, you need to be proficient in more than one position. So,
Yeah.
like you were saying, Chris, I'm sure Brett-Veach goes down a checklist for every single player, and if they do not meet the qualifications, the Chiefs don't throw their hands up and say, well, let's just take a stab at them. They move on to the next position. So I really wanted to throw that out there, Chris, because that is a huge staple in how the Chiefs and Brett-Veach maneuver the draft.
No, absolutely. Which brings me up to a name like a Josh Johnson from Utah. He's a cornerback, and if you are a highlight guy, you're going to watch his highlights, and you're going to see a guy who has a lot of interceptions over the course of his career, but they're on awful throws by the cornerback or quarterback, and they're kind of gimme interceptions. If I'm looking at a highlight reel, I don't want to see a bad throw from a quarterback get intercepted. I want to see a good throw,
right,
where the corner undercuts or high points the ball and rips it away from the wide receiver. That's what I want to see. I want to see a corner or go sticking his nose in the run game and making a tackle.
Right, exactly.
I don't want to see all of this powder puff football from a corner. I want to see him laying some wood. I want to see him playing smart. And that's another thing that Reid and Veach are looking for is intelligence in their players. They want them to be able to make good, smart decisions extremely quickly.
Correct.
Because that translates onto the field.
Absolutely, especially in two systems, one on offense and one on defense that are extremely in depth, and it takes a certain type of intelligence to even comprehend all the changes and the shifts and everything that the Chiefs are trying to do on offense or the defensive side of the ball.
Yes, and especially now that we've had a couple of years with Veach's drafts, we've seen how that character, that personality trait pays off on the field with Juan Thornhill,
correct,
with McCole Hardman, with Colin Saunders. These guys are doing fantastic in our systems because we drafted it well. Now, it's not this philosophy isn't always 100%, but if you look at the players who Veach has hit on versus other franchises in that same time frame, we've had more hits than misses.
Absolutely. Hands down, I think that the Chiefs have pulled more top-tier players out of the draft in the last 5 years than any other team that I could think of off the top of my head.
Oh, for sure. So going back to other players that I'd be looking at in the first round, and there's a lot of depth there at corner. I think that the Chiefs are going to be really looking at, like we said, that personality trait. Do they fit our mold, and are they the right type of player? But I would definitely put Kenneth Murray as our number one dream team pick for the first round, Queen at number 2, and then any cornerback really, as a number 3 for that wish list.
And I'm not even concerned. I feel like the Chiefs are going to get their guy. They always seem to pull the trigger at the right time and make the right moves, and just bring that. You got to have the charisma that the Chiefs are looking for to bring into this locker room. Nobody with character flaws. It's just filling holes at this point besides the linebacker position. But trust the Chiefs are going to put a great product on the field, and this draft is going to be a lot of fun to watch because, like last season, Chris, remember we had talked about, the wide receiver position, and the Chiefs went and got McCole Hardman, and we had been really high on a receiver. I believe it was from Louisville.
I believe so, yeah.
And so, we were left scratching our heads a little bit, but then you could see within the first couple weeks of the season why the Chiefs made that decision and how much they truly know about what they are doing with this draft and the talent they're bringing in. Yeah,
for sure. Moving into the second round, And this is kind of dependent on if we trade back into the second round. I think Zach Bond would probably be a name if we traded back that we would be looking at. I don't really see us trading back in the second round to take a corner there. And so if we trade back, Zach Bond's probably going to be the guy. If we're strictly talking about our pick in the second round at 64, probably looking at a cornerback there again. If those names that I already named have fallen, definitely going to be looking at those guys there. Another name I'd be looking at is Cam Dantzler from Mississippi State. There's another linebacker from Mississippi State. The name escapes me right now. Willie Gay Jr., I believe. He looks like an absolute physical beast. He's projected anywhere between the second and fourth round. Because of our need at linebacker, I wouldn't be terribly upset with him in the second round. I think we might be able to wait on him until the third potentially. But he's definitely going to be a guy that could step in and be an impact player. We might have to kind of deal with some growing pains the first year, but as he learns, we're going to see the flashes of the playmaker ability in him that he could be at linebacker. And we will enjoy for the next several years. Another guy that I'd be looking at in the second round, and this is completely out of the mold of what we've already talked about, but I've heard him going as high as this point. Chase Claypool from Notre Dame. He's a tight end wide receiver hybrid. I would love to see him as a wide receiver for us. 6'4", runs a 4.42. This guy is speedy and tall. Definitely has some stuff that he needs to work on, but I think he would be a huge red zone target for us, which was something that we kind of struggled with the majority of the year last year. We pretty much anytime we were throwing the ball, we were almost always looking at Kelsey when we were inside the 10.
Correct. And
we need to have another guy to stretch the defenses and make them kind of focus in on other guys. Another corner that we could potentially see here in the second round would be Bryce Hall from Virginia. He played with Juan Thornhill. He ended up getting injured last year, and so with this quarantine-esque offseason, a lot of teams weren't able to do the medical history and poking and prodding on him to see just how healthy he is. If the Chiefs feel that he is good to go, well, they could take a swing at him, and especially because we signed Breeland, we can take a look at Hall here in the second round. He'll be playing as third or fourth fiddle on our depth chart. He doesn't have to step in and be a starter right away. He can sit back and learn the game, which would be a perfect scenario for him also because he's coming off of that injury.
But at the same time, I like where the Chiefs would go with that, with signing him because, the relationship that he does have with Thornhill and the chemistry that I'm sure that they grew on the field trusting each other, that's a big deal. And if you've noticed anything about the Chiefs and who they have brought in the last 5 seasons, everything connects in one way, shape, or form. One player has a connection with another, a coach with a player, a coach with a coach, or you know what I'm saying? It's something, it's a pattern that I'm seeing that they're bringing players in who already has chemistry with another player, and I think that's a huge, huge deal as far as, the trust and chemistry for the entire depth chart.
Yeah, they're definitely building those relationships.
Absolutely.
Which was actually one of the things that helped for us to land Ricky Seals-Jones was he asked fellow tight end Demetrius Harris about Kansas City, and the way that Harris had always talked about Kansas City and the franchise, that's what really helped to persuade him to come to Kansas City. DeAndre Washington reached out to Patrick Mahomes before signing the contract because I guess he was getting approached by 3 different teams, and what Mahomes told him about the Chiefs helped to persuade him as well.
And see, I love that, and those are the backstories that a lot of people don't see. And let's go back to Washington for a second, because Washington is getting highly overlooked, and this could be a huge impact player for the Chiefs offense, because let's look at the progression of the John Gruden-led Raiders here. Sorry, I'm getting off subject here, but I just want kind of a side note here. John Gruden has basically taken this franchise and turned it into his own. And Washington is absolutely a product of their draft this last season, and why he had headed to the Chiefs. The Raiders drafted running back in the first round, who's proven to be a starting running back and carry the load for the Raiders. For whatever reason, his name is escaping my mind right now. Maybe you can help me with that, Chris. Josh Jacobs. So Washington is really a product of, Josh Jacobs coming onto this roster and taking control. And the Chiefs were able to land a talent that never got his shot, like you were saying, and get him cheaply. So, Chris, sorry, side note, I wanted to throw that in there, but continue.
Oh, you're good. And second round, I think that pretty much covers it. Like I said, the big positions are going to be cornerback and linebacker again there. And then I just threw in Chase Claypool as an outside possibility. There's a chance he could go before we even draft him at the end of the second round. There's a chance he could fall into the third round. But because of his size and his speed, I think it's going to be extremely challenging to see him fall into the third. There's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be wanting to get a guy that size and that fast. And then looking at the third round, again, looking at interior offensive linemen, and again, it depends on whose ranking you look at. Tyler Biadasz from Wisconsin, the KU interior lineman Adeniji is another guy that we could potentially be looking at. There's another player, I'm not sure which college he's from, but Hunt. All of these guys are guys that we could potentially be seeing being looked at in the third or even the fourth round. But we're going to be looking at guys who are versatile, who can play center or guard, or potentially even a swing tackle. Right. Because we're looking at that depth. But looking at our offensive line, we are not as hungry for talent there as some people are projecting. With Martinez Rankin coming back off of injury, I think that he could end up being a starter for us. We wouldn't have traded it away what we gave away last year to bring him in if we didn't see potential in him. It was just unfortunate that when he stepped on the field last year, that he ended up getting injured right away, so we didn't really get to see it a whole lot.
Right.
But I think he's got a lot of potential. We got Allegretti, who will be stepping in and probably getting a few more reps, especially in preseason, so we can see what he's all about this year. In a few flashes, we did see that he is capable of at least being a backup and playing at the NFL level. But I think we need a little bit more time to assess whether or not he'll be a starter. But if we end up not taking an interior lineman, I wouldn't be 100% upset. But I think we'll kind of see, according to Veach, where he's trying to look at creating depth. I think wide receiver is okay as far as right now, but we'll be drafting for the future if we do take one. Mm-hmm. I think running back, we're kind of okay. We're definitely going to be okay with. If we were to draft somebody on the roster right now of those four that we've already discussed, they've got to be going because I don't see us taking 5 running backs on the roster next year.
Absolutely not. There's no reason for that.
Yeah. And I keep seeing everybody and their mother mocking us taking a defensive lineman because of the whole Chris Jones situation. Unless Chris Jones gets traded in the next week, he's going to be a Chief.
Absolutely.
And we do not need a defensive lineman. We don't need an edge rusher. we have the talent on the D line to go into next year, and we are going to be fine. We have depth. We have rotational players at defensive tackle. We have rotational players at defensive end. We are going to be okay.
Yep.
And so, again, that's another position that we can pretty much cross off as somebody that we're going to be looking at. As far as like a starter. But at like 4th or 5th round, I could see us taking a flyer on somebody and seeing if they develop over the next couple of years. Linebacker, again, especially because we're probably going to see Hitchens move on after next year. Potentially, we could be looking to draft his replacement. Corner, again, we could probably use another corner because we'll probably carry 5 or 6 going into the season. And then safety, I feel that with Armani Watts and Sorensen as our backups, I'm okay for this year. But Sorensen's getting old.
Correct.
And Armani Watts is going to want his shot.
Right.
And I believe his contract is up after this next year. And so if he doesn't start getting more playing time or start taking on that role that Sorensen had this past year, he might potentially move on. So we might look at a replacement for him or Sorensen in this draft. I could see us taking a safety in the 4th or 5th round.
Which would be, which wouldn't hurt for the depth on the defensive side, and obviously that's what the Chiefs are honing in on. But all that just depends on what happens, round 1 through 4. This is kind of an open draft for the Chiefs outside of round 1 and 2. They can kind of play around and do a little bit of experimenting, and not to mention the undrafted free agents that are going to fall to the Chiefs. So that's a lot to look forward to. We're a week out. Chris, we've touched base on rounds 1 through 5 here, and gosh, is there anything else that you feel we need to touch base on? It's been a really loaded podcast. It's been a little while in Kansas City, but hey, everybody needs a break from the season, but hopping right back into it. But Chris, is there anything else you'd like to add to this show today?
Just 2 things. One position that's going to really affect the talent that falls to us, aside from corner and wide receiver, as I've already discussed, is quarterbacks. There are some teams that are really hoping to draft a starter as well as a quarterback of the future who will be sitting and learning. I think that 3 of the main teams, Miami, San Diego, and Cincinnati, are very clear. But the questions still kind of remain for the Raiders, for the Patriots, for a lot of these teams that could potentially end up drafting some quarterbacks in the first round that are kind of reaching and kind of forcing it just so that they can get their guy. Jordan Love is a guy who is rumored to be going in the first round. There's a couple other guys who could potentially be reached for in the first round. If there's a run on quarterbacks, if there's 5 or 6 quarterbacks taken in the first round this year, that increases the opportunity for a quality talent to fall to us.
Absolutely. That's a really great point, Chris. There are some teams extremely hungry for a quarterback, and they're going to have to go after that in the first round. So, yeah, it's a really, really valid point.
And then the other point that I want to make is, as Chiefs fans, we need to get used to the fact that we're going to be drafting at the end of the first round for a long time to come.
Yes.
And while it's stressful because there's a lot of stuff we're going to rely on to happen ahead of time for us to quote unquote get our guy. The reason that we're picking at the end of the first round is a great thing, and to be looking forward to this for the next 10 to 15, heck, the next 20 years, I'm totally fine with.
Absolutely.
And so get used to it, Kansas City. It's going to be great. And a week from tonight, hey, we're going to have our first major sports event with the draft. Get excited, you guys.
Hey, and it's nice to see the Chiefs be able to take somebody off the board on the first night.
Absolutely, something we haven't done in quite a long time.
Absolutely. Seems like the last few drafts, Chiefs fans have been sitting on their hands through the first day and waiting on day two, to see any name come across the board for Kansas City. So it's going to be great, exciting. Football is back. Hopefully, everything will be done with the coronavirus and we can get things back in full swing this season. That is not guaranteed or promised, but as football fans, you prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So, Chris, a lot going on here in the NFL. As crazy as it sounds, we've covered all these issues today, and we're going to be doing more shows here coming up, Kansas City. But I do want to touch base on something. This evening, I will be doing a podcast with Crane Brewing Company in Kansas City. Christopher Myers is the owner. And we're just going to touch base on some issues with, the coronavirus and what it has done, to the community and how local businesses can come together and get through this tough time. Because, Chris, I've seen you post this on social media. It couldn't be a more important time to shop local and support your local businesses. So I just want to create an opportunity for these Kansas City local businesses to come on and share their concerns or their ideas or innovation on moving forward, or how businesses can help each other get through this. So I think that this pandemic has let the world know that it takes everyone working as a team to make all of this happen, make life happen. And things are hard right now, and if everybody can come together and do the things that it will take to get past this, I think everybody will be okay. But again, we'll have Crane Brewing Company on tonight, and probably some more businesses to come. So Kansas City, look for that. I know it's not football, but we are a community. This is Chiefs Kingdom, and we are all one. So no matter what the topic, this is Kansas City, and we want to show here on KC Kingdom Radio that it's not just about football, it's about life. And I look forward to having, Chris on. So thank you, Kansas City. That is our episode today. And look, I will be talking with you all this evening. Chris, thank you for coming on the show, and I will talk to you next time.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, this is Kingdom Radio, and I am your host, Richard Smith. Kansas City, have a wonderful day.
Thank you for tuning in to Kingdom Radio, your go-to podcast for everything Kansas City Chiefs.